Well, if ever there was a symbol for reconciliation, that is it. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered on SABC 3 and Channel 4. My name is Desiree Chauke. Today marks the 16th of December, which is celebrated as a day of reconciliation between black and white South Africans. The day was first celebrated as Dingaan's Day, which stood for the triumph of the Voortrekkers against the Zulu army led by Dingani at the Battle of Blood River. It also became a powerful instrument used by white Afrikaners to build Afrikaner nationalism. Since the 1920s, the day was also used by the ANC, the SACP and other political organizations to mount protest against white minority rule, and was used in 1961 to launch Umkhonto weSizwe. 25 years later, why are some of the divisions that plagued South Africans since the days of apartheid still an issue today? We unfortunately cannot air your comments tonight, as Unfiltered is not live, but you may still engage your thoughts on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtags at SABC News Unfiltered and at SABC News Online. Let's now welcome our guests. Prins runs a monthly program called Ubudlelwano, which brings together random people from varied backgrounds and cultures whose aim is to get to know one another. He's also a journalist. Thanks for joining us. We also have Andile Mgxitama, who is the president of Black First, Land First. Thank you for coming through as well. Stanley Henkeman is the executive director of the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation, IJR, since 2003. The Institute for Justice and Reconciliation has been interrogating the state of reconciliation, including the areas of economic transformation, race relations and social contact, political participation, national identity formation and transitional justice. And he was also the TRC. Was the TRC successful in bringing reconciliation to South Africa? That's the question we're asking you today. And are we still a rainbow nation that Nelson Mandela envisaged? How can we move forward? Let's bring in our guests into the conversation. Mr. Henkeman, let me start with you, and I will ask the same question of all of our guests. The most supposedly reconciling event of South Africa, the most recent one, was the rugby Springbok victory in Japan, and it created such diverse and divisive conversation. What are your thoughts about sentiment around this victory in terms of reconciliation?
Thank you very much. I think, we have to acknowledge that it was an important event, and I emphasize event, and justifiably the whole country, were happy, and you saw it in the outpouring of support for the Springboks when they toured the different cities. But we have to bear in mind that reconciliation is not an event. Reconciliation is not a highlight. Reconciliation is a process, it's an outcome. And so in order to get to that outcome, you have to do something. And I think as South Africans, we are quite naive when we think that reconciliation will just happen automatically. Reconciliation is the result of hard work put in. And hard work is the work of justice in a nutshell. And that justice obviously needs to be done at different levels, in different ways. But ultimately, you cannot have reconciliation in the full sense of the word in the face of injustice, in the face of inequality, in the face of unemployment. And so we have to just understand that as wonderful as that moment was, that is not reconciliation. Yes, it was a snapshot of what could possibly be if we find ourselves in a position where we are united, but that united state doesn't come automatically. It has to be something that we work for. And so I don't want to take anything away from that moment because it was an important moment, but that in itself is not reconciliation.
Andile Mgxitama, was the Bok victory an opportunity for reconciliation?
This is the third time South Africa since 1994 wins the Rugby World Cup. No, let's conceptually, let's separate things. This is a moment of feel good, just like you know how the nation was in a very good mood when that couple in the chicken outlet was proposing. I'm very happy, and everybody were making offerings and so on. That has got nothing to do with reconciliation. People play good rugby in a team that does not reflect the nation, and they won. But that is not reconciliation. What are we reconciling? Let's go to the beginning. What had brought this division? So, when your other guests talk about justice, but it's not saying justice redressing what? Who did what? We must go to 1652, the arrival of white people in this country. And this is the national grievance. This is what separated us. They took our land, enslaved us, created the township and a good life for themselves, and that has not been changed. So we remain unreconciled as a consequence of this historical reality which has not been addressed.
Why has 25 years of democracy failed to bring that about?
There's a number of things, but essentially the ruling party, the ANC, must take a big chunk of the responsibility. The ANC has overwhelming support of our people, and Nelson Mandela has given us a chance. When I was young, I was saying Nelson Mandela is a sellout and so on. I don't say that anymore. There were two options, it seems to me, the Nelson Mandela option and the Winnie Mandela Chris Hani option. Chris Hani and Winnie Mandela's option was, we will march to Pretoria and take power. That was not possible. Nelson Mandela cut a deal that gave us the state. We control the forces, the armed forces, we control the police. As black people, we have the state. Now we need to do the right thing. Give black people what they deserve. And the ANC decided to rather stay on this side of the divide, and as a consequence, we have this problem. But let's ask the question. Nelson Mandela is reconciled with white people. What have white people done in return? Nothing. Zero. And that's our focus. White people in this country, talk about white monopoly capital, landowners, it goes on. They own 97% of the JSE, 80% of the land, 80% of the senior management. They own this country. What have white people done? Don't talk about reconciliation. Forget about the sellout if you want. Ask the real question. What have white people done to complement what Nelson Mandela did?
Prince Andile has taken the conversation forward, but I'll give you the same opportunity I've given everyone, whether the Bok victory was an opportunity for South Africans to reconcile.
Sure, I agree very much with your first guest. I don't think one event speaks for a whole nation, or one event is a whole summary of where and what we are as South Africans, whether you're black or white, or whether we should be here or not. I think the process of reconciliation is a process. It's a whole long, engaging process, and we must be willing to get out of our comfort zones and engage with one another in a sensible matter that we can take away things from it and lock heads about things. We must come out of our homes, out of our safe spaces, and be able to engage with one another so that we can get to know one another. We don't know what we are about. Ubudlelwano is breaking down otherness. Yep. What are you about? What are you about? Do you have black friends when you're a white guy?
But Andile is correct, though, that before you even get to that, shouldn't we be dealing with the privilege that has been brought on by being recognized or being benefiting from whether it's the resources or the system because of color?
The privilege is there. It's full stop. And whether white people acknowledge it or not, and white privilege, but to be able to get to know where people are from, you must first engage with them. And that's my approach, is to get people to sit down, and whether it's in a structure that we create, yep. And sit down and see what these thoughts are about. When Andile is speaking, he's on some pedestal. When Malema is speaking, he's at a pedestal. When Kalikil...
350 years, we still don't know each other. 350 years we've been here.
Give me a chance.
300, you say the pedestal. 350 years, you say you don't know us.
Diego, there's your pedestal.
And you can't speak...
Do you have any white friends?
Why must I have white friends?
Do you have any colored friends? Do you have any Indian friends?
You're calling black people colored and Indians.
Do you have any
and so you're putting
friends?
yourself in a position to interrogate black people instead of actually acknowledging that your privileges, all of them are illegal. All of them come from mass murder. All of them come from oppression of black people.
You're on a pedestal. What are you promoting?
There's no possibility of reconciliation with this kind of arrogance.
Okay,
of white people refusing to acknowledge their oppression.
We're going to take a break, and it's getting heated, but it's a necessary conversation. You're watching Unfiltered. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.